Greetings and a warm welcome from me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today, in the latest of my deep dive series, I'm going to celebrate the most important moment of the whole year. Yes, it's when the sun returns to the sign of Aries, which is the first zodiac sign. But in Western tropical astrology, it's predicated on the seasons. So the spring equinox ushers in the first 13-week period of the year, known as Cardinal Quadrant 1. Cardinal Quadrant 2 comes with the summer solstice, 3 with the autumnal equinox, and 4 with the winter solstice. So the start of this new year is particularly exciting because the sun is angling to Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, the sign of the collective, for the first time in over 200 years. But the symbolism of the fire of the sun's arrival back in Aries, when we've had such a soggy time of late, with all the energy in the sign of Pisces, now we can get on the front foot. But the thing is, the angle between the sun and Pluto is very strategic because we're talking about the fire of Aries, but also the intellect and communication of Pluto, the planet of change, in the sign that really connects us all, which is Aquarius. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're new to my channel, it's lovely to have your company. If you have any thoughts, please share them. I interact with each comment. If you're a returning visitor, thank you for joining me once more. We've gone through the 119,000 subscriber mark. If you can help me to race towards the 120th, I'd be so grateful. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. Now I'm just going to tell you how I'm going to structure this video. So I'm going to take a look from a solar perspective, the event chart, but also from an equal house perspective, which shows an ascendant in Capricorn. But if we take the midpoint in either chart between the sun and the moon, it's actually at 1 degree in Gemini, which is very much about communication. So the next 13 weeks is going to see some fiery communication, but also some frustration because, of course, we're coming into the Mercury retrograde season. But there's another thing about 0 degrees Aries that you may not be aware of. It's known as the vernal point. And there's another form of astrology which is very closely linked to the nodal axis. You've obviously heard of the North Node, our direction of travel, and the likely outcomes that we're going to manifest in this life. The South Node, the things that the habitual behavior that we're trying to escape from, and the energy we may have brought into this life in terms of when we were birthed. But there's a form of astrology called Draconic astrology. And that takes the position of the North Node in everyone's chart back to 0 degrees Aries. So even if you had your North Node at, say, 12 degrees Sagittarius, in Draconic, it takes your North Node back to 0 degrees Aries. And it can change your chart quite radically. Now I'm going to share Madonna. Please stay with me. I will share both her natal and her Draconic chart. When I did do a feature on Madonna last year, people were saying, oh, you've got the wrong zodiac sign for her. She is an Aquarius, not a Leo. No, she's a Leo in Western. She's an Aquarius in Draconic. What is Draconic? Draconic is our sole purpose. If you want to understand what you incarnated when you came into this world, that's your Draconic chart. It's the roots of your personality. The outcome is your natal chart. If you really want to explore your Draconic chart, you can take advantage of my special offer and get your Draconic natal chart, but also your Draconic 12-month forecast, all in one package for 30% off. Please see the link below. Essentially, the zodiac means the story of the zodiac, the animals, and it starts with the ram and the roar of the ram, because the ruler of the sign of Aries is Mars. So that's very much about passion, determination, initiation. It's about new beginnings for us all. But the critical thing with this year's event is that we also have the North Node Chiron and Mercury all in the sign of Aries as well. So there's an enormous opportunity for a big reset. But we have been going through a big introspection with all that energy in Pisces. And that's why it's really important to see the big picture, because of course we had the new moon in Pisces, then we had just recently the Neptune cazimi, and those energies and the quarter moon in Gemini squaring up to the Sun and Neptune in Pisces, those energies are layered on top of this event. But what this event does is give us some idea of what we can expect collectively over the next 13 weeks. And one of the things that stands out with this chart, as I mentioned, is the midpoint between the Sun and the Moon. So you can have midpoints for all sorts of planetary alliances, but the key with the Sun is it's our passion, it's our drive, it's our physicality. The Moon is our more empathetic, receptive, emotional, security needs. If we get a blend of those two things, we get a snapshot of what the character of a particular event or person is going to be around. So in this case, the midpoint being in Gemini, House 3, is very much about quick communications. But that's forging a gorgeous link to Pluto. So Pluto, high in the sky, itself forging, as I mentioned before, an incredibly powerful strategic link with the Sun. So the Sun is about freshness, risk, being progressive, getting on the front foot, look into the future. But with Pluto's support, it helps us to see the big picture in a more strategic and collective way. So that's really, really exciting. But that midpoint is basically saying that our communications with one another are going to become more unified. I feel what's happened essentially over the last years, but particularly with Pluto going through Capricorn, the extremes of money making, and without a consideration for the human dimension. And then more recently, since March 2023, with Saturn in Pisces, that's really making us much more oppressed if we feel that our emotional needs collectively are not heard. So what Pluto moving into Aquarius on the 21st of January did, through to the 2nd of September, returning on the 18th of November to Aquarius, what that's doing is help us to think, look, we've got all this technology coming in, AI, robotics, and so forth, but there are ways that we can collaborate. Now, one of the great stories that I've seen recently, they've been shutting small banks all over the place in Britain, so that's physical retail branches, and I read a story earlier today about an idea I've had for some while, which is if all the banks came together and collectively pitched in some investment, you could have one hub in each high street of a small town, and that could be staffed, and that could take all the transactions for all the big retail banks, but they don't have that physical cost which they're trying to avoid. So we get the connection of the community, Pluto in Aquarius, but in an enlightened way. And because the third house in Gemini is very much about our everyday world and the way we link and connect to people, that's astrology working in a more positive way. We've also seen a lot of collective action around agriculture, where farmers, quite rightly, are just sick to death of being rinsed by big supermarkets. Now, I know it's a contentious subject because a lot of us are really feeling the pinch, but because those big supermarkets have become too powerful, the whole trope at the outset of all these big out-of-town stores was that they're going to create more choice. No, all they've done is reduced plurality, so they can actually impose their will on the producer and, frankly, their will on us, the consumer. If you can get your food locally from local farmers, do it. If you can buy from local stores that are run and owned by local people, do it, because the community is so important to push back. It's the same issue with cash. You know, cash is being stripped away in lots of ways, but that creates power and makes us less powerful. Again, try to pay with as many transactions as you can through cash. So that's the big picture. What about the other parts of this interaction? Well, you can see the moon's in the proud Leo. That's warm, it's affectionate, but it is opposite Pluto. So I feel over the next 13 weeks, our emotions are going to be charged up much more intensively. But we do still have that collective in Pisces, and one of the aspects on this event is Saturn in a conjunction with Venus. The financial implications of Venus can never be underestimated. Yes, it's the planet of peacefulness, of love, of affection, of relating, but it's about loot. And Saturn's very much about structures. Being in the 12th house of this event, it suggests over the next 13 weeks that there are going to continue to be, or there is going to continue to be a squeeze in terms of our financial situation. Also, Jupiter is in a very positive link with Venus and Saturn, which is hopeful in the second house of everyday money, but it's suggesting we need to be much shrewder at using the resources we already have. So being thriftier, like we used to be years ago. We don't have to have everything brand new because most of it's produced by actors on behalf of the Chinese government. Let's be honest about this. So the things that we are seduced by, very often they're not very good quality. Environmentally it's awful because it's been shipped halfway around the world. Again, if we can get things locally or recycle, this is not being trendy, this is being pragmatic and it's sustainable. But we do have Mars in the 11th house of the collective in a stormy right angle with Uranus. So the next 13 weeks we are being pushed to make the most of our resources, but I think there are going to be some shock factors when it comes to the collective financial outlook for us all. You can also see that the node, Mercury and Chiron, all very close together in Aries. I feel one of the things that's happened with the Facebook age particularly is that we've all given away a little bit of our autonomy. Not because we can't make lovely connections on Facebook or have nice chats. It is quite incredible. It's just it's not being applied in a fair way. So we're not necessarily seeing what our friends are sharing. We're seeing what Facebook wants us to see. And that is to their commercial benefit. So what it started out being, it is not now. And therefore it started out as something fun of sharing our pictures. Now it's become about control. So having that energy in the first house in Aries, not just the sun, is about reinvigorating our individuality and being proud of it. And if that means that we don't interact through social media, or we don't necessarily just share those holiday pics, which actually can create a lot of exclusion, and perhaps I feel even depression amongst some people who are not lucky enough to be having life good. So I feel that this event is really saying, let's celebrate being a bit more risk-taking as individuals and getting in touch with what makes us authentic as individuals too. Now, showing the event chart from an equal house perspective, and as I mentioned before, the ascendant in the worldly, Capricorn at 1147. That puts Pluto in house 1. Makes sense, doesn't it? Because we are in some ways being transformed into a completely fresh start with Pluto. I feel there's little doubt about it. But you can see the sun is in 3. So that discussion and chatting is still very powerful. But the midpoint in this chart is in Gemini still, but in house 5. So that's very much our desire to be creative, to be playful, to have amusements that lift our hearts and our souls. But it does mean the moon's in house 7. Tendency with the moon in house 7 is to be very agreeable, but sometimes give away our power. So we need to just make sure that with Pluto, particularly in house 1, that we're not using our power collectively in order to suppress anyone else who doesn't necessarily see things the same way, the moon in the 7th house. But you can see that a collective in Aries beyond the sun is in house 4. So I feel we are being transformed in terms of our emotions at this time in a very profound way. What about that stormy link between Mars and Uranus? Well, Mars in 2, along with Venus. Venus in 2, it loves being there, but having Mars in 2 definitely diminutes the stability of Venus in house 2. So Mars in 2 squaring with Uranus in 5, it's saying if we're reckless with our resources, we pitch into situations without thinking very carefully about the consequences, we may regret it, but it does point towards the potential for financial volatility in terms of the wider perspective. You can also see that the path of fortune up there in Virgo is in house 8, shared resources, banking system, and Saturn in this equal house chart is not in house 2, it's just in 3, but there's still an opposition. So anything to do with transactions, really going back to that concept of cash, Saturn in 3, we're going to find restrictions in the way that we can express ourselves, but maybe restrictions in terms of online banking. We're definitely going to see some interruption of services, I feel, whether it is through banking terminals, getting our statements on time, transfer of funds, and also continuing issues around the transport system. So this is all over the next 13 weeks, because in Britain we've had some big industrial action going on for a couple of years, which isn't at an end. But I feel that Saturn opposing the path of fortune in house 8 points again to a continually tricky time for our collective finances. Now on the screen now, I'm showing Madonna's nativity, so her natal chart. I'm not a particular fan of Madonna, you know, I mean, her music's been around in my life. There's been some absolute crackers over time. I don't have a big passion for celebrity news, to be honest. But obviously she's been an incredibly influential player. And one of the things when I did erect her chart about 6 months ago, I just felt instinctively there would be some Virgo knocking around. I knew she was a Leo, but I just felt there would be some Virgo. And guess what? In natal astrology, she has got a Virgo ascendant. It's conjunct her moon, but it's also conjunct Mercury, the ruler of the sign of Virgo, but Mercury just tucked into the 12th house. That's quite incredible, you know, because I understand from what my wife tells me that Madonna has been really interested in sort of purity around food. So that would really fit with her chart. But in terms of the power of her brand, it stands out all day long. The midpoint between her sun in Leo at 23, which is just in the 3rd decan, so it has a Mars emphasis to it. So that gives it more of a furnace-like projection. But the midpoint between her moon in Virgo at 11:32 and the sun at 23:06 is 2 degrees in Virgo. So that's the balance of her nature in natal astrology, but it's in the 12th house. So this is a person that does have a very psychological instinct, and you know, I understand that she's very much into things like the Kabbalah, but again, it's only because what my wife has told me. But that's her natal chart, and you can see in terms of a performer, she's got Mars up there in the 9th house in Taurus, so that provides some provocative energy, particularly as it's in a quincunx with Saturn in the 4th house in Sagittarius. So the other thing that really stands out with this chart is Neptune in the 3rd, so the ability to project images, very, very strong indeed. But like a lot of famous people, she's got the sun applying to Chiron, and it's in an opposition. So you can see there is Chiron at 19 degrees in Aquarius opposite the sun. But the big takeout in terms of her power, sorry I've slightly digressed, is that Pluto, the planet of power, is right on her natal midpoint. So that's really that strength of personality, that conviction that what she does has true meaning. And of course she does have Venus and Uranus as well as the sun in Leo. So, and Venus in the 11th house, wow. It is in a square with Neptune, which is interesting. So again, that ability to shape and be very creative, very strong. But Pluto on the midpoint in Virgo, that is what she's manifesting in this life. But what about the Draconic chart that apparently she applies to her life? So on the screen now, we have that, and that puts the Sun at 29 degrees 04 in Capricorn, which is very much about ambition. She's had Pluto apply into that recently, and that coincided with her health issues. The 12th house can be to do with ill health, but whereas her natal chart is very much to do with seeking that purity, her Draconic chart is very much the rebel, because of the ascendant in Aquarius conjunct Mercury, which is in fact in the second decan of Aquarius, where it's exalted and is also the sub-ruler. And she has Moon also in the second decan, so very much about communication, but Moon in the first house on the ascendant in Aquarius, with Pluto at 7 degrees in Aquarius instead of the 1 degree in her natal chart. But guess what? Her midpoint between the Sun and the Moon is 8 degrees Aquarius. And the Pluto position retains its strength. So all the relationships in the Draconic chart are the same. So you have the same planetary aspects. So the square of Venus and Neptune, that's still there, but in different houses. Neptune's moved from Scorpio to Aries, and Venus has moved from Leo to Capricorn. So really, really fascinating stuff, isn't it? The Draconic chart, if you get your Draconic chart done, and remember you can get yours and your Draconic forecast for a year for 30% off, please see the link below. Draconic will open your eyes like never before, because in my chart, for example, I have a collective in Aquarius. In Draconic, my Sun moves to Gemini, but my Moon moves from Aquarius through to Cancer. So my work is communication, Gemini. Also the Sun's in the 3rd house in my Draconic, but the Moon is in the 4th house, very much about feeling. And sure enough, I'm a great lover of family, home, and my work is to do with listening and working with people around their emotions. So very much the Moon in Cancer. In her case, I feel the drama and the provocativeness that we see with a lot of her performance comes from the Aquarius energy, which gives her the courage to try different things. She's also got an incredibly fortunate combination of the North Node conjunct Jupiter in the 2nd house in her Draconic chart, so she obviously has been blessed with great financial success. So Draconic moves the North Node to the vernal point, which is what we're celebrating with this event, the start of the astrological year for 2024, and Draconic astrology is very much tied in to this event. So now I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces in terms of the ascendant, the Sun, or the Moon, and you can check out what I feel will likely shape up for you over the next 13 weeks. So Aries, it's really exciting for you because the next 13 weeks is of course going to feature the solar eclipse in your sign, which is going to be conjunct Chiron, a huge opportunity to move into the present after what I feel for some Aries people, the last year has not necessarily been easy. But that's not automatic because, of course, it depends on your personal natal chart and also how your chart is evolving through its progressed nature. Essentially, progressions is where we take one day or just under one day for each year of our lives, count forward. So if you're 41, count forwards 41 days in the ephemeris, take a snapshot, and that shows us where the planets have moved to during that period of time. It's remarkably simplistic, it may sound, but it's remarkably accurate. So each person has their own progressed environment to work within. And in terms of your situation collectively, because Neptune moved in 2012 into the most psychological area, I think you've learned a lot since then. But over the last year, particularly with Saturn in 12, if there has been some vulnerabilities or lack of loyalties, or some endings that were kind of brewing up, they've probably happened, and it hasn't likely been an easy time. And just to reassure you, my progressed Sun is in Aries, so I can really relate to that picture. But what we get with this event is the furnace of the Sun being in your sign, but also that collective with the North Node, with Mercury and with Chiron, all in your sign. And that's really so exciting. And also your ruler Mars, you know, it is in a very dynamic location still, the 11th house, along with Pluto. And because this event sees the sun in your sign linked with Pluto, new people are going to be coming into your situation. You can have lots of conversations. That things are going to go much quicker. If things have felt very sluggish and bogged down, you're going to get much more on the front foot. What's the catch? Well, I feel if there is a weak link around a romantic relationship, you're going to need to keep working at it. I don't necessarily think it's terminal. It could potentially be that you're quite settled in a relationship, but it's more that your lack of feeling settled in your world in some ways is affecting the vibe between you. So that's entirely possible. Then again, if you're single, it could be that you're really working through some very deeply rooted stuff that may be in terms of self-limiting your approach to situations that you can really work hard on, particularly with Chiron applying to that solar eclipse in your sign. Remember, this is the second one. You had one a year ago. And that was conflicted by Pluto, ironically. That was a square. But on this event, Pluto is very much your pal. And equally, when we get to having that solar eclipse, because Chiron's in the mix, it really is a chance to shift things that have been stuck for a very long time. So it's an exciting time. Yes, you do need to stay very much in touch with the more emotional, psychological and spiritual side of your situation. But there's a real opportunity here to start rattling forwards in the way that you're so well known for. So it's about seizing the moment and really smashing through any obstacles and demonstrating to people just how incredibly dynamic you can be. Taurus, we really have to be mindful of your ruler in this equation. And if you recall, the midpoint between the sun and the moon is in Gemini, so that's the second house for you. So that's very much the foundational part of your life. It's been a lot of change for you, I think you'd agree, in recent times. Uranus has shook things up, could continue to do so if you're born later in the sign of Taurus, so you have other key planets located there. And also, of course, Pluto pushing through your 9th house since 2008. A very provocative influence, asking you to be more experimental, learn new skills, try out different things. You may have travelled during that time, lived overseas during that time. But if the restlessness of Uranus has made it difficult to apply yourself to something in the way that you're so well known for consistently, I think this particular event does give you the chance to grapple with that, because your ruler Venus is in a tight embrace with Saturn, and that's in the part of your situation to do with your future. So I feel that that side of you that can be very shrewd, wise about maintaining the parts of your situation that give you a foundation, whether it's financially or in terms of your emotions. Yes, your life structure may have been a bit shook up in recent times. You can get things a bit more bedded down over the next 13 weeks, or can you? Because I feel the area that could still be a little bit unsettled for you may be around your professional situation. Obviously, Pluto's pushing you and going to push you. There could be some transformations over the years to come, but it's Mars. Mars is right at the top of your chart, and that's making you very assertive potentially. And it's linked to Uranus in your sign, is also making you very rebellious. So you can see you've got two contra energies going on. One part of you, after all the changes and the experiments and the great things you've done, there may be part of you that yearns for a more settled time, but it seems that things are still in a state of flux when it comes to your professional situation. And it may therefore be the case that you have to push again. There may be some more changes. You're not quite doing the thing you really want to do, or even if you are doing the thing you really want to do, it could be the politics in that particular workplace that don't work for you. If you feel that someone or an organisation takes you for granted, there's not much motivation or appreciation or acknowledgement of how hard you work and how dedicated you are. And the cluster of energy, including this spring equinox sun in your 12th house, including the solar eclipse that's set to come on the 8th of April in house 12, in a conjunction with Chiron. If there is anything deep within you, an insecurity, a blockage, a vulnerability that maybe you're not quite at ease with, this is a fine time to bring it into you even closer. We all are vulnerable. That's part of the human state. It's wired deeply within us. And there are just times when it's easier for us to shine and life feels lighter. And there can be an element of that, I feel, in the next 13 weeks. The people, for example, that you really can feel a great deal of trust for, who have been the very steady citizens over a long period of time, they could be great supports to you. But I feel that there is some deep inner work that you really need to tackle. But by the time we get round to the summer solstice and the next 13-week cardinal quadrant, you're really going to be fired up and moving forwards. But because we've got Mercury set to go into a retrograde soon, the psychological part of your scope, to be honest, on this event is really to the fore. So the best way to deal with that is to face it, to look it straight in the eye. So Gemini, having the midpoint in your sign is a glorious opportunity to really seize the moment with this event. For you, in terms of the overall scope, the spring equinox occurs in house 11, which is very much about your future plans, your network, your higher ideals. And it can be very lucky, but key, you have Mercury, your ruler here, in a really terrific conjunction with the North Node. So if you're someone who's very skilled, and you often are interacting with people, especially people that you have a strong connection to, the fact that Pluto in house 9 is really provoking you to download more information, broaden your outlook, travel, but in a connected way with people that you have a meaningful alliance with. All of that's terrific. What's not to like? Well, I guess we could argue that Mars being in house 9 makes you very adventurous, but it is squaring with Uranus in 12. So if you're pinned into a situation where you're not finding it so easy to build those alliances, to connect to people, perhaps you're working in a job that's very unfulfilling, your restlessness can be absolutely fantastic over this next 13 weeks. But also there is a case for you pushing outside your comfort zone in order to change things. The problem is your ruler Mercury is of course about to go retrograde on the 1st of April, and it's soon going to be going into its pre-retrograde shadow. So even if you do decide that you're going to pivot into a new direction, that doesn't necessarily mean that it won't come with some headwinds. So we have to be realistic. That's the difference between my astrology, I feel, than some of the other YouTube astrologers who just say everything's going to be amazing. Unfortunately, life is not that simple. So I'm trying to give you a realistic expectation. And I feel that your connections, your friendships, your network can be richly beneficial to you over the next 13 weeks. I think you can be at the center of proceedings in a very charismatic way. But if you do feel penned into a situation at the moment that feels limiting and it's not so easy to move forwards and realign your direction of travel, that's where the frustration and the irritability could come into play. Now, Venus and Saturn are in a conjunction in your 10th house. It's possible that somebody is really actually very attuned to what you have to offer, but in order for them to work with you, offer you a job, promote you, they may really be looking for you to show some awareness to the structure that they're working within. So even though this chart really points towards you being much more of a free spirit and much more idealistic, if you do want to make progress in a more corporate sort of situation, you may have to cut out a little bit of that free-spirited part of your nature. But if you're prepared to do that, then, and you get on well with them, your dedication could be rewarded handsomely over this next 3 months. So Cancer, one of the things that I find a bit frustrating about popular astrology is that you're painted as someone who's chained to the kitchen sink, very nurturing, great skills around children, cooking, blah-de-blah-de-blah. And of course you might be very good at those things, but I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink. What you are is a cardinal sign, just like Aries, which means when we get round to the summer solstice, you're activated strongly in terms of your individuality. What you're activated strongly on this event is your ability to raise your profile, to be dominant, to be successful, to set goals and ambitions. And that is what I actually feel you are very good at doing. Yes, you have to feel the environment's right for you to prosper. In other words, you like the people you work with, the energy's good, because you're very attuned to those things. But once you're settled, you've got quite the inner drive. And that inner drive is really going to be activated over the next 13 weeks, round to the time of the summer solstice. So a superb opportunity for you to seek out greater recognition, to set your stall out, to set your intentions around your goals and ambitions and go for it. And having Mercury aligned to the North Node in this area and the coming solar eclipse, which is going to be aligned to Chiron, what that's saying to you is that if there is any self-doubt washing around you that has held you back in the past, this is your time to really go for it. And so a huge opportunity for you. Also, of course, Pluto, the planet of change, is linking with this event so powerfully. So Pluto for you is in the 8th house, very much to do with transforming your resources, but your connections to others. So there could be some deep relationships that are going to shape up in the next 3 months. What about the energy in the sign of Pisces? It's been very strong of late, and I think it has given you a desire to widen your horizons. Think about travel. Maybe you've been learning some new skills, downloading information. If you are negotiating around a contract, we can't ignore the fact that Saturn's applying to Venus. So for sure, do take care around the small print. What about the fact that the midpoint is in your 12th house? Well, it is a good point because the 12th house can be quite psychological. And that midpoint does forge a great link with Pluto and the Sun. So what I think it's saying to you is that although you can be ambitious, demonstrate to people how well you manage things. That's the key with Cancers, managing things brilliantly. It doesn't mean to say that you have to do it in a particularly obvious way, and this is where your intuitive people skills are so important. So the subtlety of the way you interact with people or work behind the scenes can still see you set free when it comes to applying for a job that really excites you, starting your own business up, showing a lot more determination and thrust in whichever role you have at the present time. But the way you go about it can be quite shrewd. So that 12th house energy, for sure, you need to watch out for the political machinations that go on in lots of situations and businesses. But essentially, I think your chart is very, very positive. You do have the square between Mars and Uranus. I think that really means that if there is any situation where you feel clamped in and you're not liberated, you're not using your entrepreneurial business skills as well as you could, it's going to push you to make a change. So a wonderful opportunity to really demonstrate to people just how talented you are. Leo, what I love about this event for you is we're evoking the fire triplicity element. So you're at your best when things are passionate, and this can really give you such a boost of energy. The 9th house is about exploration, independence, freedom, travel, being a bit more rugged around your physical exercise routines potentially. If you're really wanting to learn new skills, a language, play an instrument, or develop skills you've got around those areas more, because you've got Mercury in the sign of Aries 2, aligned with the North Node, your instinctive appreciation of what's fresh and new is really being turned up to max what's not to like. You also have the moon in your own sign. But of course, Pluto is opposite the moon. So it doesn't mean to say that you're not going to face any opposition if you're choosing to shake things up right through the next 13 weeks. Also, Mars is in your 7th house, making you much more inclined to set your boundaries, and perhaps even professionally. So if you do feel that you're being limited, held back, or you're just bored, to be perfectly honest, in what you're doing, a really exciting time lies ahead over the next 13 weeks. Uranus being at the top of your horoscope also means that your way of looking at things in an innovative, fresh and different ways, that's known in marketing as being a disruptor approach, can actually be such a gift to you, because maybe you're going to see, if you're given the opportunity to pitch in, that your fresh way of approaching things can attack things from lots of different angles that someone else isn't quite seeing. But if they're not seeing it, that's where there could be some tension, because you've got to try to nudge them towards that big and enlightened outlet that you have. And with Mars in your opposite sign, I don't think you're going to lose the discussion. But obviously, if you're working in a much more traditional environment where they find fresh ideas challenging, maybe even a bit fearful, or you've got a line manager who's trying to squeeze you down because it's threatening to them, you may have to think about a change. So the 9th house energy talks about you getting right back on the front foot, because to be honest, since 2008 and Pluto going through Capricorn, there's been a lot of sacrifice by you, not in terms that you've complained about it necessarily. I feel that you've been very supportive of others, and you've become very good at committing and investing particular sets of skills and talents in a very supportive way, which has been taking great discipline, and it's helped you to improve your attention to detail in a massive way. But I think part of that whole Plutonian journey through Capricorn has in some ways been limiting the more passionate side of your nature. So it's time to ignite the flame, Leo, because this can be really quite an exciting next 3-month period. But it's all about you seizing the moment, not being too analytical about things. Listen to your gut instinct, because that's what the sign of Aries is about. Feeling it right and then going with it quickly, fast, excitingly. What a time lies ahead. So Virgo, for you, such has been the collective of energy in the sign of Pisces of late, relationship matters may have been right to the fore. With the sun moving into your 8th house, that's the sector of transformation. It can be the sector of reincarnation, and remember I was talking about that with the Draconic charts. But for you, if something around a relationship isn't going beyond the conversation, especially with your ruler Mercury set to go into a pre-retrograde shadow and being alongside the North Node in your 8th house along with the Sun, that 8th house energy is about deep transformation. And if you feel that something is stuck with Venus applying to Saturn in your sector of relating, this is a time when you may need to consider some changes. But the changes could be deep within you, because we can keep our physical reality the same, but if we change our relationship to the physical reality, that in itself becomes hugely exciting. So what a time it can be for you. I feel that the 8th house energy is helping you to get in touch with things in a more psychological way. And because Pluto is linking so brilliantly to the Sun on this event in such a unique way, something can transform. Maybe it's about how you earn a living, because the 8th house can be about money, Pluto in the 6th about the actual role, and of course the midpoint is in Gemini. That's your connection to the wider world. So wouldn't be a complete surprise if the change you were thinking about was where you worked, but it's where most of all you've been invested. And if you feel you're not getting back a response to the energy and effort you've been putting in recently, that's where you may choose to make some changes. So Libra, what an exciting event for you, because the sun moves into your 7th house. Your sign evokes the energy of the 7th house because it's the 7th zodiac sign and it's ruled by Venus, which is very much about relating. So the sun is in your 7th house, but of course we have the node there very close to Mercury and Chiron. And we have the solar eclipse coming on the 8th of April in a conjunction with Chiron. So huge possibilities to develop your huge talent for connecting to others, forging partnerships, alliances, collaborative arrangements. This is where you are absolutely star quality. Yes, your ruler Venus is checked by Saturn on this event, which means you still need to continue to work on being very patient and applied, going through the processes in a very precise way. That is going to be important. You may still feel that you're giving a little bit more than you're getting back, but this is a wonderful chance for you to showcase your unique abilities. Also, because the midpoint is in your sister air sign of Gemini, that's about growth, expansion, travel. Really exciting. That's forging an amazing link with Pluto in your 5th house of personal expression, and the sun is as well. Such a powerful chart for you. It really can be very, very exciting. Challenges, well, I think it is Mars squaring up with Uranus. If you are in a situation where you feel really penned in and you're not getting the same level of commitment back to you, whether it's with an employer, with a business partnership, with a family member, a friend, or in a personal relationship, that can make you a bit edgy and more rebellious, because what you're craving in a way is excitement, but you're also wanting people to salute what makes you so special. You know, at the end of the day, Libran people do need acknowledgement, and if acknowledgement is lacking as well as excitement, there's definitely going to be part of you thinking, look, if I shift and find someone else I can align with better who can create that buzz, then that's something you're going to be open to. So if there is a relationship which is not quite giving you everything you need, the fact that Saturn is applying to Venus and Mars is squaring with Uranus could bring out the rebel in you over the next 13 weeks. But at the same time, how you can connect to others, that talent you have for seeing the other person's side of the story, for listening skillfully, that's a great gift you have. But sometimes we can do so much to be available to others, we lose our identity. And that's the critical thing you need to avoid over the next 3 months. Scorpio, recent energies have given you a glorious opportunity to showcase your creativity, your craft, your flair, your artistry. But you know, sometimes just being very productive in that way is not necessarily enough. We need to shape those ideas into something more practical and pragmatic. And this event gives you a fantastic chance to do that over the next 13 weeks. So if you have found yourself quite inspired recently and really producing lots of good stuff, whether it's art or pottery, or you're a crafter or you're a musician, your output may have been high, but now you're being asked to shape it in some way which gives some kind of lasting or tangible benefit. Now, the 6th house that the sun's evoking is also, of course, very much to do with work, where we're of service, provide practical solutions. But it also is to do with our daily environment. So, you know, if you're a bit laid back like I am, this would be a great opportunity to grapple with decluttering, having a little bit of spring cleaning, finding ways to reorganize things, because that essentially creates new energy, fresh energy, and it can actually, the virtue can start to make you feel better. Also looking at your diet and nutrition. Even if we have really great diets, there's probably a few things that sneak through that we know are naughty and terrible for late night snacks. And of course, you know, doing that kind of stuff raises our blood sugar. You know, it's not so good for our dental health and so on. So small tweaks can create marginal gains. So if you change 10 things in your life 2.5%, that's a 25% shift in the overall setup you have. So whether it is domestically, whether it is thinking about whether a job is giving you enough personal satisfaction, because I think recently you've become much more conscious of your need to express your talent. So that could be an area that can shift as well. If you're really into pets, you may find that your appreciation of the animal world leaps, literally like a bubbly dog, over the next 13 weeks. And if you'd like to have a new furry companion, you may decide to go for it. But we also need to look at the role of your two rulers. Now, Pluto, your modern ruler, is very positive on this event and does point towards some shifts around your home, how you live there, who with. You may even decide to renovate, Pluto in the fourth, or perhaps move altogether. But Mars in the fourth is trickier because that's in a square with Uranus in your sector of relating. I feel that if you are in a relationship which is not working so well and you're craving for something you're not getting, it is possible that the next 3 months could be a little bit turbulent, to be honest. That said, if you're in a happier place around relationships, the fact that Venus and Saturn are in that conjunction, forging that amazing link to Jupiter, can be very lucky for you. So I feel that the Mars square Uranus is going to only come out in a situation where you really feel unfulfilled. So Sagittarius, really excited to share this with you because the Sun moves into your sister fire sign, evoking the energy of your Sun. And for you, it's house 5, which is the most exciting house of all. It's very much in keeping with the energy of Leo, which is where the moon is. So you have that support as well. And it's all about turning the afterburner up on what is really exciting for you, because there is no doubt about it. Over the last year has at times, I feel, been really quite testing in terms of your emotional, home, domestic, family situation. Even if you come from a tight clan and you support each other to the hill, there's probably been some physical challenges, you know, whether it's contractors turning up late to do jobs on your home, or the contractors being very slow in being processed on some kind of rental or purchase, or you've just felt that the emotional dimension of your life has been heavy going. Even at the moment, with Saturn applying to Venus in that area, there is a little bit of a potential to feel like you're walking through a field of glue that's coming right up to your waist. But there is a new beginning, and it is the Sun moving into Aries. And of course you have Mercury applying to the North Node and Chiron, and you have that exciting solar eclipse coming. So you're really moving into fantastic territory for you. Yes, we are going to have Mercury going into its pre-retrograde shadow, slamming on the brakes on April the 1st for 23 days, which will be potentially problematic for us all. But it just points to the fact that as much as we can have that fiery enthusiasm, as you probably know, Mercury was retrograde in your sign at the start of this year. But of course, there was a very strong Sagittarius influence at the start of this year. So your determination to change things has been very strong. It's just the immediate emotional environment has felt quite hostile. But now you can really start to shine, because you can dazzle people with your personality, your optimism, your greatest gift, your absolute belief that things will get stronger and better. And because there is a terrific link between Venus, Saturn and your ruler Jupiter, that fourth house stuff, which has proved challenging, may see you get the return over the next 13 weeks by something improving. The only thing you've got to watch, I feel, is impatience, because with Mars squaring with Uranus, Mars in house 3 is where our nervous system and quick communications, but it can lead to exasperation. And then Uranus in 6 is your health. So if things don't go quite as quickly as you would like, you could boil over with frustration. So it's understanding that Saturn is with you through till to the end of May 25 for this period of Saturn's journey through Pisces in your fourth house of emotion. So throttle back a little bit, set your shoulder to the wind. You're going to dazzle people, but maybe you just need to go a little bit slower than you would ideally like. Go through the processes, but the lessons you've learned about protecting your emotional world, your family, they're lessons that have been hard won. Don't give them away, because that part of you that can be very free-spirited and just absolutely believe everything will turn out fine has been challenged a little bit in recent times. But you are going to feel a real hot improvement in your vitality, and that is really exciting. Go and show people just how absolutely brilliant you are over the next 13 weeks. So Capricorn, this event is going to put a big focus on where you live, how you live there, and who with, but also on your inner world, because the inner world is our relationship with our emotions, wherever we are. You know, whether we're in a glorious holiday destination with the sun beating down with a nice ice cold cocktail in our hands, or we're in a rainy day, a rainy bleak day in the winter, it's our connection to ourself inside. That's there all the time. We're taking our home with us. So that's really the big takeout from this event, that because the sun moves into Aries, your fourth house, but it's connecting with the North Node, Mercury and Chiron. We're going to have that solar eclipse on the 8th of April, conjunct Chiron in your fourth house. Also, Mercury is going to be going retrograde from the 1st of April in your fourth house. So where you live, how you live there, and who with is a big part of the theme, but that relationship to your inner world is much more important. If that's working well, a very exciting time lays ahead for you over the next 3 months. If you feel you want to grow in that area, you know, consider some counselling, download some personal development courses, have some life coaching. All of those things can be very, very enriching. Now, Saturn, your ruler, has been, of course, the last year in your sector of everyday communications, and it may have created some complications, particularly recently. And it is on this event applying to Venus in your third house. So the third house can be about our connections to our neighbours, our siblings, but also connections to people online through technology. So your emotional needs are coming to the centre of your situation, but it's how you convey the message which is so critical. And because Mars, the planet of passion, is in a tense right angle with Uranus in your fifth house, fifth house is where we want to showcase our individuality, but it's also where we want to be speculative, and Uranus is very impatient. So that square with Mars suggests if you don't necessarily get the answers you want as quickly as you want, particularly around financial matters, it could see you wanting to boil over and be a little bit defensive. And the reason for that is the fourth house energy is very tender, and it is potentially going to espouse some vulnerabilities for you over this next period of time, but it is a massive opportunity too. I really must stress that. And also the midpoint I mentioned for this event is in Gemini, so that's the sixth house. So maybe the changes at home in terms of where you live, how you live there, or your relationship with yourself, your inner world, some of it can come about in quite a practical way. So it could be by eating better, getting more exercise, being more conscious of where you can help others in a nurturing way. So there's a lot to go for in this event, but I think it does require you to, in some ways, be more conscious of where you feel more frail or more vulnerable, but being okay with that, because we can chat our way beyond these things and we can project outwards. And Mars has been giving you a lot of ability to be very robust about any incoming traffic over the last year, but it may have also prevented some proper emotional dialogue, and that is what the opportunity is for you this next 3 months. So Aquarius, what an exciting event for you. The number one thing you're going to experience is an exhilaration. Things that have felt stuck, very, very stuck and laboured recently, suddenly are going to start to sweep forwards. It's not going to be a panacea because, of course, Mercury, aligned to the North Node in the sign of Aries, is going to go into a retrograde on the 1st of April, so that is something to be mindful of. but you've got the solar eclipse coming on the 8th, and that is going to be conjunct with Chiron. So your mode of communication, you are an air sign. So for you, Aries energy is in house 3, very Gemini-like. So it's where your mind is most agile, but it's going to see a lot more connections to people around you on a daily basis. Loads of text messages and emails pinging backwards and forwards. Because the midpoint is in the 5th house, brilliant for your social situation, potentially even romantically, and with Pluto right at the start of Aquarius linking to the Sun and the midpoint so fantastically well. Your power potential is huge. Really, there's so much excitement to go for. Finances may be a little bit stilted to begin with because of Saturn applying to Venus. And with Mars in your own sign in a square to Uranus, if some things are still not going as quickly as you would like, there could be moments of complete exasperation. But generally, things are going to start to gain traction in such an exciting way. Do you have a message that you want to share? You're going to be able to showcase it brilliantly over this next 3 months. Do you want to be more involved and more integrated into your local community? Brilliant chance to look at that. If you want to see a pickup in connections with siblings, you can do that. If you want to publish something, a pamphlet, launch a new website, share talents that you've got through some kind of training scheme, you want to attend night classes to download some new understandings yourself, it's all kicking off for you in such an amazing way. This is the shift that you really, really need, because I think all that Piscean energy has been so sluggish of late. It really has been challenging, but now the force is with you. Welcome, Pisces. So the Sun makes its way out of your sign and into Aries, joining up with the node, Mercury and Chiron. So the 2nd house is where we have the foundations in our life. Because you have Saturn applying to Venus in your sign, there's something about what you're going through at the moment to do with building something. Maybe it's a new way of thinking, maybe it's a new way of dressing, maybe it's a way of taking a talent you've got and showcasing it in a pragmatic but artistic way. Maybe you're actually looking at a renovation of a property, perhaps you're moving all together. But in order to do all of those things, you need to make sure that the finance is there, and also that what you're planning has some foundations which are going to stand up to building up from them going forward. So that's where you are. A lot of what you've been doing recently, which has been so exciting, just needs to be shaped into something a little bit more compact, solid, worked through, and that's going to see you work forwards in a really brilliant way. Because the midpoint of this event is in Gemini, changes to where you live could be part of this. Even if you're not moving, you may want to redecorate. What about Mars being in your 12th house squaring with Uranus in the 3rd? That could, to be honest, be quite mischievous. Because if there is some latent frustration that you feel that's linked to your past, perhaps to do with people being very unfair, unkind, all the way, and sadly, to abuse. If there is a story of that threaded into your history, your desire to articulate your hurt and anger is still going to be very strong. And even if that does mean at times that you will feel that your foundations are a bit rocky, that is going to be part of the story over the next 13 weeks. It's been a real pleasure being with me. Don't forget to check out that Draconic chart offer, which is based on moving your North Node to the vernal point, which shifts your chart around. You can also get your 12-month forecast for 30% off. If you prefer to have the natal version of the offer, you can see the link beneath this video for much more information about that. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Wishing you all the best for the next 13 weeks, and please subscribe if you've yet to do so.